Darksiders is quite a franchise. The first game kind of set up a bit of a mystery. It actually answered the mystery and ended on a cliffhanger. And then the second game basically ignored the whole thing completely and told, well, technically a prequel type of thing, but more of a sidequel, honestly, because like around the ending of Darksiders 1, anything that happened in Darksiders 2 basically did not count for anything at all. Unless you consider Darksiders 2 as a bit of a retcon, but okay, well, we have the third game to think about it, for example, and the third game is yet another prequel to Darksiders 1. You know, yet another game that takes place during the 100 years that war was imprisoned. And for some reason, it resets up the mystery, the conspiracy, rather, I should say. Only the third game portrays it as though that the council itself is to blame for the whole thing, when I don't remember if it was in the ending of Darksiders 1. Like, I remember that there was this like angelic dude who was technically to blame, but I don't remember if the council was pulling the strings behind the whole thing. It kind of like was not the point even, because like by the end of Darksiders 1, war was about to basically, quote-unquote, fight everyone along with the other horsemen. It was not necessarily like, you know, I'm gonna go to council and have some questions to ask them. It wasn't really about that. Well, the third one basically portrays it so that, yeah, its council is to blame for literally everything. So, like, whatever. It's kind of like neither here nor there. So we have 3 games. Technically, we even have 4. And unfortunately, no one really played the 4th one, the isometric twin stick shooter. But I heard that it's a prequel as well. But it's not even the 4th game, really. It's just like a complete. It wasn't even made by Gun Games, I think. It's also pretty interesting how in the third game, actually, we have humans actually portrayed, right? And the funny thing is that the way humans are portrayed in Darksiders 3 are exactly the way they are portrayed in the Remnant games. It's absolutely the same character design and art style. And spoiler alert, one of those characters is actually Strife in disguise, and I think that character just literally exists in the Remnant games. I'm not sure, but I think he does. I don't think Remnant takes place in the Darksider universe, technically, because although you could probably make an argument on the surface level for it, I think kind of like the lore and the whole cosmology of the Remnant games is completely different. I only played the first one, and I actually loved the hell out of it. I played the first one probably 3 or 4 times, and both co-op and solo. In fact, I only played it properly all the way through once with a friend. The other 3 times I played through it solo. I kind of loved it, you know. It was kind of like more methodical and actually thoughtful. Like, it actually, you know, plays like a video game and not just like a clicking simulator. It was like more of a video gamey take on something like Warframe, essentially. And my biggest problem with Warframe is that Warframe basically has no gameplay. It's just run forward and click one button simulator. Just like Diablo, right? But with over-the-shoulder camera. And Remnant was basically the same way, right? But the gameplay was a bit more methodical. You actually needed to aim for like weak spots, right? You needed to prioritize enemies, and you needed to dodge, right? None of those things you have to do in Warframe. You just run forward. Not to say that Warframe is a bad game. There is actually a bit of a kind of like gameplay feel to the whole thing until you reach your first point where you realize that you need to get a proper Warframe. And once you get a proper Warframe, that's not one of the starting 3 ones, although I heard that Excalibur or Caliber or whatever the hell, the ninja one, the quote-unquote correct one, you can use it like basically for anything forever. But I started with Mag, and yeah, eventually you had to switch from it, and once you ditch like some of the starting weapons and you ditch the starting Warframe, you become so overpowered that basically until the very, very end, unless you go into those like super high level missions that are like level 100, you just one-shotting everything. Or if you stand on escalation for 90 minutes, however the hell they're called, you know, those like escalating like horde modes, right? It's, yeah, you know, Warframe basically had no gameplay, and Remnant was something relatively similar, but with actual gameplay, and I loved it. It even had somewhat like builds and stuff like that. Now the problem though is that the game was not designed at all around depth and replayability. I mean, because it's a shooter, you know, how deep can you make a shooter? Like people who played like hundreds of hours of something like the Division, you know, would be able to relate, I suppose, to what I'm trying to say here. There's only so much you can squeeze out of a formula like that. And it was not a real like service game or anything like that. There was like nothing going on. There was basically no matchmaking, I think. Or maybe if it was, I don't know. Like who's gonna just like play with randoms, really? No overworld, no nothing. Was a terribly implemented procedural generation system that changed like almost literally nothing between levels. There was like 3 possible bosses out of 2. Every 2 bosses you would fight had like 3 variations, you know? So it was like, yeah, you're pretty much guaranteed to fight like same bosses over and over again, except for maybe one of them will be different, but probably not. All the levels were like the slight quote-unquote procedural differences between levels were very iffy. There was almost no difference at all. Like really the game, if you haven't played Remnant but you played something like Returnal, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. Where like procedural generation, let's just might as well not be there, you know? If they couldn't be fucked to actually design levels for their video game, they might as well just, you know, procedurally generate it and set it in stone. Like actually having that procedural generation system in game, like, contributes absolutely nothing to the final experience, really. They could have, you know, just like copy and pasted levels a bit more so that you actually get to fight all the bosses in one run, or just make them somehow, you know, optional, kind of like secret bosses to find. That would have been nice, right? But no, Remnant was not like a real Souls-like, really. It was a hallway, like typical, like Diablo style, even more specifically Warframe style, kind of like hallway, procedurally generated hallway shooter. And that was its biggest problem, of course, because if it was a real video game, a real Metroidvania type, you know, Souls-like, I think it would have made for a great game, honestly. But no, they went for something more generic, and something I personally got completely sick of after a couple of playthroughs. And then they made the second game that was literally the same game again. Like, they didn't even change the setting. Like, I kid you not. The game starts, after the game opening, the first biome you go into is literally just, like, the last biome from the first game. I played it for like an hour, and I said, I cannot. I'm sorry. It is literally the same game. It's not even funny. it's just like an asset flip of the same game. I cannot play it again. I stopped playing Remnant initially because I got sick of it, you know, and now I have more of it. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't understand for whom the second game is for. Well, normies who only played the first game once and said, yeah, it was all right, you know, so that they could maybe play through it again. Yeah, but the thing is that if you liked Remnant 1 and you're interested in playing it again, just play it again. There's absolutely no reason to buy Remnant 2. It's the same game. You might as well just play the first one again. Okay. So that's kind of like just like an interesting detail that I obviously did not know about, right? That in Darksiders 3, the human models are just identical to human models in Remnant. But I don't think those universes are connected in any way, except for, you know, being connected by being made by the same developer. Yeah. Well, Darksiders 3 initially did not launch on my computer, so I couldn't play it, which was just a giant waste, honestly. Because it actually runs perfectly fine on my machine. It's not optimized very well, but it's fine. It runs okay. I get 60 FPS most of the time. And actually looks rather well, I think, even on the lowest settings. And yeah, you know, despite being a DX11 game, for some reason it asks for Windows 10, or it just wouldn't launch at all. So that's how I could never play it many years ago when it actually came out, because I was not a Windows 10 user. I had an old Windows 7 laptop for game development, because it doesn't really matter for game development. For game development and some gaming, and all of my actual work I was doing on a Mac. I could not be asked to like install Windows 10 and, you know, deal with all the nonsense of it. And anyway, so yeah, well, there's basically no way to stand by this opinion without sounding like a contrarian. But I have no idea what your problem was with Darksiders 3. You guys are absolutely ridiculous. The first game, none of you played the first game, and for very good reasons. First game was actually very cute. It was somewhat ambitious, I suppose, in certain ways, but first game was made with very good intentions. The problem is that they ended up making a game with the most generic and boring combat possible, and art style wise, you know, to fit the combat, I should say. Darksiders 1 felt very generic, and its cartoony art style and kind of like pseudo, you know, water painted like materials, textures, as people call them, shaders, I suppose I could say. Maybe you will understand that. Texture is not the same thing, you know. When you think of a texture is just an image. What goes into making a material for an object, for a 3D object, it's not just the image, it's a whole set of instructions, and that whole combined can be referred to as either material or a shader. Material and a shader, not necessarily the same thing, but because usually by shaders we refer to like pretty complex, pretty complex things, like a water shader. You know, that's not just a moving texture, right? A lot goes into making shader for water, or a shader for like skybox. Skybox can be a shader, you know, yeah, usually it's material. Most materials are much more basic than things that we usually refer to as shaders, and it's definitely no textures though. But anyway, using your, you know, video game community's language, like watercolor painted, and it made the whole game look kind of flat and low poly, despite the fact that the game wasn't actually that low poly, but because of how it was textured, it certainly looked like that. And I did not enjoy particularly the look of Darksiders 1. Cartoony character design also did not particularly do it for me, but that was not as big an issue as just the fact of how flat the world looked. Because, like, I think you can oh, goddamn fly. I think I ate a small one. I think you could, if you absolutely wanted to, have characters to be designed like that, but the world in general, I think, needs a little bit more detail. Otherwise, it's just kind of, it kind of feels like you're running around like a very, very low budget prototype, you know, of the final game. It just looks like, nobody bothered to put any detail into the world, rather than being like a stylized choice. So that was Darksiders 1. Darksiders 1 was very good intentions, but I will just come out and say it. I loved it. I finished it, okay? And I was one of the people who bought it originally. I bought it for PS3. I supported the dev. I really liked the trailers, or the trailer. I think I only saw one, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna play it. I had no idea what I was buying, by the way. So my first impression was like, oh my god, this combat system is terrible. But then I was like, oh my god, this is like a 3D Zelda type of thing. Wow, cool. Still a bit boring though, but I'll keep playing. And I basically finished the whole game thinking that it's cool. I like the ideas behind it, but it's kind of boring. And I finished the whole game like that. I supported the dev. I spread the good word. None of you did, because you all heard about the game after the War Mastered Edition even came out, or you haven't even played the game most likely. But a lot of you heard that the game is kind of like a 3D Zelda inspired product. So a lot of people these days kind of have this silent respect for it, although pretty much no one played it. And definitely nobody played it when it actually came out. Like, I did not know a single person who played it. Well, my copy was definitely played at least for one friend of mine, but I don't think he finished the game. I think he played it like a normie. He played it for like 2 or 3 hours and said, whatever. And, went back to playing GTA, whatever it was, 4 or 5, the last one at that point. Probably 4. Yeah, guys. Then the second game came out, obviously. And that's it, by the way, right? So, like, Darksiders 1 came out, and the story of the whole franchise just stopped there. Like, since then, we had technically 3 more games, but, well, properly we had 2 more games, and nothing happened, period, in the franchise since then. Somehow, we... Boo-boo, you okay? Somehow, we... Oh my god, what are you... Aini, where are you lunging like that? If you lunge too quickly, this thing automatically locks. Not by design, but by quirk of it being old. Anyway, and then we had Darksiders 2, and everyone loved Darksiders 2, but just like normies usually do, I don't think anyone actually finished it. As per usual, less than 10% of people most likely had finished it, but they remembered it because basically it was still kind of like a 3D Zelda type of thing, but the whole game took place in a giant flat open, empty, open slop, Ubislop world, and everyone loved it for it, right? Because it was very, very trendy at the time. It also had a Diablo-style tiered loot system, which I don't know whoever needed it, but I suppose it appealed to some people. And my assumption is that people played it. Oh, and in that giant empty open world with nothing of consequence to do, there are like the Zelda dungeons, entrances to those are located in the giant open world, like overworld, you know, overslop world. And of course, you know, the open slop world fatigue at that point was not entirely a thing. People were still, you know, for some reason, enamored, you know, with all the Assassin's Creed games and all the Far Cry games. So it was definitely, you know, there's a trend there. Are you noticing the trend? The trend is that Ubislops were highly popular, and like Borderlands and Diablo was popping off. And basically Darksiders 2 was done with all of those elements kind of like just combined into one big gray boring mush. But what normies did is that they played the game as they usually do for about 5 or 6 hours. They said, this is too complicated for me, and also it's too repetitive, but I'm never going to call it too repetitive because I cannot be negative about something I, you know, spent money on. So they played it for 5 or 6 hours. They said, oh, this is too complicated and too overwhelming. I don't know where to go, you know, and I don't know how to do these Zelda dungeons. It's too complicated for me. The game was actually mind-numbingly easy, and that was probably the most boring part of it. But yeah, you know, you guys played it for about 5 or 6 hours and said, all right, I don't know if you know, I'm gonna go play some more Halo, I'm gonna go play some more Call of Duty, and you never came back to it, but you remembered it as this giant, you know, game with this giant open world, so it must have a lot of content, you know, it must have a lot of freedom, immersion, whatnot, and you remembered it fondly for what you thought the game must be, right? If you actually had the balls and the discipline to sit down and finish it. But much like with all the big sprawling open world games, normies, you know, never finish those, but they remember them fondly because they think, oh, there's like all this greatness hidden in these games, right? So Darksiders 2, for some reason, was remembered fondly by the community at large, despite, honestly, I have no idea, like, if you actually sit down and play through it, I have no idea what your defense for that game would be. That game was even more boring than Darksiders 1. It was the most generic, bland, mind-numbingly easy, just exercise in bloat, padding, and like task list game design. So whatever. But then Darksiders 3 came out, right? And the funny thing, so nobody played the first game, so not a lot of people really had even like an opinion on it. Everyone, for absolutely no good reason, loved the second one. And then the third one, everyone just decided, okay, this one, it's time, you know, because let's you know, vary it up, let's spice it up. The third game we're all going to hate for no reason. And the third game came out, and everyone literally just hated the hell out of it. And I do not, again, understand how anyone with a brain could sit down, play Darksiders 3, and then come away saying or thinking that, like, this game is just absolutely terrible. I don't know if the game was necessarily marketed as a Souls-like. If it was, well, joke's on you also, because what are you doing listening to marketing, you know? Just buy the game, play it, and have your own opinion, you know? And if you thinking, well, I don't want to just buy a random game. I don't, like, what if you know, what if I hate the game? I'll just waste, like, my money. Well, it's literally, it says Darksiders 3. If by now you don't have the opinion on whether you want to play Darksiders 3 or not, you can probably just play 1 and or 2, which I do not necessarily recommend, but you could start with 1, right? You could start with 1, and you could probably buy it for like $5 or $10 and then decide whether you want to play 3 or not. You know, if Mirror's Edge 3, or even, you know, second Mirror's Edge game technically doesn't have a number at the end of it. If real Mirror's Edge 2 came out right now, I wouldn't be looking for reviews. I would just buy the game. Would I be worried that, oh, what if that game is poisoned by, like, bad design and whatnot, and microtransactions and DI, writing, whatever, maybe, okay? Oh, but I'm gonna have to be the judge of that, not Synthetic Man, because it's Mirror's Edge too. I'm buying it, I'm forming my opinion, and then I'll talk about it. So if third game in the series is coming out, and you should know whether you want to buy it or not, without watching any reviews. Just look at the trailer and be like, okay, this confirms that this is a Darksiders game. It's not just some random BS that's called Darksiders 3. This is a Darksiders game. Okay, cool, I'm gonna buy it and think about it. But of course, guys, you don't do that, right? So I don't know if it was sanctioned by the developer or not, or the publisher. Could be, right? Because Souls were popping off at that point, and we all know that THQ and Gunfire, or Gunpoint, whatever the hell, I think it's Gunfire, the developer, right? For the whole franchise. And they, well, not the whole franchise, the fourth game was not made by them technically, but also it's technically not the fourth game. The dev is very good at making a game that is currently capitalizing on current contemporary trends. Not just contemporary in general, but specifically like super ultra what is popping off right now. And at that point, what was popping off, of course, was the Souls formula. And I don't know if it was the dev who couldn't shut up about Darksiders 3 being a Souls-like, or if it was the publisher, or specifically just the people in the marketing, or specifically just the people in the marketing selling that idea to the shills, the influencers, so that they would push it. Or if the shills, the influencers, people you watch on YouTube, if they just kind of like came up with this kind of like zeitgeist type of thing on their own, that, oh yeah, Darksiders 3, it has Souls style checkpoints, which were like in the first game and worked the same way pretty much, by the way. But but none of you played the first game, right? So you see it in Darksiders 3, and it reminds you of Souls, and you're like, oh, it's a Souls-like, ooh. And you also see that the camera is now very clearly over the shoulder. It was kind of over the shouldery also, in other games, but it's kind of close, and it's over the shoulder, and you think, oh, it's a Souls-like, ooh. And no, it really isn't. If you play the game for longer than 20 minutes, it becomes abundantly clear. In fact, literally the first thing you play, you kill like 2 enemies, and then it's a boss fight. That's how the game opens, And it's actually one of the most, if not the most, cinematic, I would say. It's not a set piece, but it's a cinematic. It's a very dynamic, if you will, boss fight. It's the most dynamic, the most cinematic, and that specific kind of the meaning of the word in the entire game. And that's how it opens, It's not a Souls-like, it's just a Darksiders game. Does it have elements that kind of remind you a little bit of Souls kind of formula? Yes, the way you upgrade your weapons, and in New Game Plus, the way you upgrade your armor, that system just lifted directly from the From Software games, absolutely. And what of it? I don't know, guys. So definitely, big miss was to market the game as a Souls-like, because it never was. But those of you who listen to the marketing, well, what are you doing listening to the marketing? Just buy the game and form your own opinion. And those of you who were lied by grifters and shills of YouTube, well, I'm sorry you were lied to, but then again, why are you listening to the shills? Oh, hello guys, whatever, please like and subscribe, and today we're talking about Darksiders 3. What Darksiders 3 is actually this time the Darksiders series takes on a Souls genre. Like, what the fuck are you doing listening to those people? Okay, just, you know, do you like Darksiders? It's the third one. By now you should know whether you're interested or not. If you are, just buy the game and you fucking play it yourself. Don't listen to grifters, okay? But the grifters, obviously, who themselves don't really play video games, I mean, they pretend to play them, but what do people like Actman actually play? Like Halo and Call of Duty? In their free time, so to speak. They are professional reviewers of all video games on the planet, but what do they actually play? Like Halo, you know? what does he really know about video games? Synthetic Man, what does Synthetic Man play in his off time when he is not reviewing the latest game he feels like hating on it, you know? Instead of playing something he actually likes and talking about that. He plays like free-to-play, some free-to-play service like Dragon Ball game. I don't know if things have changed, but like I remember approximately half a year ago, because Synthetic Man for the longest time was like the only grifter worth, well, not really listening to, but Synthetic Man like actually had kind of like a bit of a gamer DNA in what he was talking about. He fully transitioned to grift about a year ago, or maybe even a year and a half ago. But that was also the time where I just completely stopped checking his channel, because as he transitioned to full grifter, he also stopped really making content. He now makes like one video a month, if that. I have no idea how he's able to like support himself, you know, making that amount of content, but I realized he just streams all the time. He's a streamer now, really, not a YouTuber. all his streams is that like he would play a whatever game he will end up reviewing in 3 months for like a couple of hours, and then he just plays like the Dragon Ball service game. Like that's it, you know, that's what those people are playing. And you know, are you a Souls fan? Are you the kind of person who literally have thousands of hours in Dark Souls 1? Are you the kind of person who played through RE4 like 30 times? Well, what, you gonna trust your opinion, you know, to like people who have only played those games maybe once and thought, yeah, it was all right. Okay, back to GTA. Like, no, guys, stop it, okay? Stop importing your opinion from those people. So, yeah, Darksiders 3 is overtly not a Souls-like. It is actually much closer to basically what Darksiders used to be, which is kind of like a cheap God of War clone, but this time with heavy inspiration. Well, essentially, of just like one mechanic directly plucked from Bayonetta, and that is the dodge mechanic. The dodge, except for the fact that the dodge in the classic combat mode, sorry, not classic, default combat mode, the mode with which the game shipped originally, it barely fucking cancels everything, so it's kind of like a pain in the ass to use. So about 90% into my first playthrough of the game, I switched to classic mode, and the only difference with the classic mode is that it actually, you do not command use items, because you still cannot use items during most animations, but it skips the use the item animation. So basically items are being used quote-unquote instantly, although it's not instantly because you still cannot use them in the middle of an animation, but you skip like about a second of actually using an item. And yeah, health is restored gradually by Estus. And yeah, that's one thing. You know, the game now has Estus. Oh my god, it's a Souls-like. It's a Souls-like, you guys. Go away, please. And it's still restored gradually, even in the quote-unquote classic mode. And but let's go for another round. Actually, come on, let's go. It's good weather right now. Good weather, good walking. So it's not really making the game too much easier, but it does make the game a little bit easier. What really makes the game not a Souls-like at all is that in the classic mode, which is supposed to be classic as in it's, you know, how Darksiders 1 and 2 used to play, your dodge cancels everything. You know? And the dodge canceling is very inconsistent and completely just illogical in the default mode. So, for example, it's it cancels everything when you're just comboing the air, but if you fight an enemy, all of a sudden it stops canceling basically anything until the very end of the animation or the very beginning of an animation. But when you're just comboing the air and you like trying to just like test things, it actually cancels everything perfectly. But yeah, in the actual combat, in the default mode, in the quote-unquote Souls mode of the game, the dodge hardly cancels anything, and it's very inconsistent. And the strange thing, though, is that the game was very obviously meant to be played in the classic mode, with in the mode where dodge is immediately canceling anything, because I believe the game was probably designed that way, and then later somebody decided, okay, what if we make the game a bit more tactical, a bit more methodical, and kind of like slow down the process a little bit. But the game was very clearly not optimized for it, in the department of the amount of enemies that you fight at the same time, for example, because you basically fight like a God of War amount of enemies most of the time. And the way enemies are programmed, you are very obviously meant to play them Bayonetta style, meaning you are meant to play very aggressively, constantly be on the offensive until the enemy decides to finally respond, and then you dodge at the last second and you continue the offensive. It is very obvious that the game was designed to be played like that. The game is not really designed to be played kind of like reactionary. I mean, you are playing reactionary in the sense that you are expected to be dodging all the time because you are very squishy, which does not necessarily mean it's a Souls-inspired game, but, well, that's yet one small, inconsequential, kind of like Souls-like, like Souls-esque element that you may want to point to. You are meant to, dodge pretty much everything. And the gameplay is reactionary in that sense, but you're not waiting for enemies to hit you. You're meant to be on the offensive 24/7. It's not like in a Souls game where you're waiting for the enemy to hit you, and after they hit you, they have a period of time where they, need to. Oh my God! After the animation, what do they call them? Like recovery. Yeah. Once they enter the state of animation recovery after they failed to hit you, you're meant to attack them only then, right? So no, in Darksiders, hardly any of them have any like recovery time. They basically just hit you, and just like in previous Darksiders games, or maybe even like a God of War type situation, the game is not animated like a Souls-like, and that's probably something worth talking about. But anyway, so the game does not play like a Souls game. You don't have a stamina, and you are meant to be playing on the offensive, because there's no point waiting for the enemy to hit you and open themselves with a long recovery animation to actually being hit. No, if you do that, you just end up like not killing everyone. You will be fighting the gruntiest, the smallest enemy just for hours. No, there are way too many enemies most of the time fighting you that you're meant to be on the offensive. You're meant to be on the offensive. You're meant to do your best, try to stagger enemies, and only dodge at the last time. Well, if you play in the default combat mode, you basically just cannot do that. You cannot react to enemies attacking you. You can only play it in that combat mode if you don't stay on the offensive, but the game was very clearly not designed to be played like that. So It can be frustrating, but I played through 90% of my first playthrough like that. It's actually playable, and the game has many other aspects of itself that are hella enjoyable. So anyway, what else did I want to play? Oh yeah, another element, another thing, another factoid for why Darksiders 3 is not a Souls-like is how enemies are animated. The reason, and a lot of developers actually don't understand that, but I think a lot of other developers just don't necessarily try to go for it when they make something Souls-inspired. Maybe with good intentions, trying to make something they could own. But the problem is that a Souls-type gameplay doesn't work without really smooth animations. And yeah, sure, Dark Souls animations can be exaggerated a little bit, but most of the time they are predictable in a kind of like natural sense, right? They are predictable in that even if they are not completely realistic, they kind of make sense, in the rules of the universe, where Dark Souls takes place, right? You suspend your disbelief, you kind of like accept the rules of this semi-anime-esque world, and you can kind of tell, right? Yes, sure, in later Souls games animations became fucky, so that games could continue to become progressively harder, so that they could be still marketed as extremely difficult games, which they basically never were until maybe some of the bosses of Elden Ring. Which, like, Elden Ring is where kind of like the Souls, not even genre, the Souls games, they finally reached the point where, okay, now this is completely let's not hunt anyone there, okay? Yeah, like From Software Souls games have finally reached the point with Elden Ring where it's just undefensively. Okay, this is just hard for hard's sake. Like, this is just not hard as we designed it to be hard because that's the design, right? No. Like with Elden Ring, it's very obviously, okay, we made it hard so just so that, you suffer, and that the game could be marketed and shilled by shills and grifters on YouTube as, oh my god, this is the hardest game ever, you gotta try it. Okay. And, yeah. Darksiders 3, right? What was even the point I was trying to make about Darksiders 3 at this point? I don't remember. Okay, it has some Souls inspirations, but no, the gameplay is nothing like Souls. It has no stamina. It doesn't even have equipment, really, the same way. You can't even upgrade that equipment. Equipment that exists in the game, by the way, on your first playthrough, until, like, in the second playthrough, you can upgrade it, but in New Game Plus, rather. But the way enemies scale in New Game Plus, which they scale basically to be tanky AF. They don't necessarily hit all that much harder, but they are so stupidly tanky. Your armor, like, yeah, okay, it used to give you, 5% physical, like, damage reduction. Now it's gonna give you 15. Oh my god, what a big difference. So really doesn't matter all that much, even in the context of the first playthrough and the second playthrough. It's also, like, I don't know, New Game Plus works very, very weird in Darksiders 3. I don't know if I will have the time to talk about it. Well, anyway, so other kind of Souls-ish elements in the game, yeah, I suppose, but honestly, the gameplay is more like Bayonetta. Only with kind of like a Souls camera, which doesn't fit at all the gameplay this time, because it is basically a Souls-type camera, and you absolutely have to play the game on PC, and you have to use the UUU mode to increase the FOV. Absolutely, the game is otherwise unplayable. By the way, without modding, I forgot to say it about Hogwarts Legacy, but I added that information into the description of that stream. Hogwarts Legacy is unplayable without modding. Primarily the mod that allows you to re-offset the camera back, because like, this is how you play the game. Like, Aini is your character. This is how you play Hogwarts Legacy. It's ridiculous. Like, there's a mod that allows you to re-offset the camera back to its proper position. And the game is like 300 times more playable and almost entirely not annoying as hell anymore. Yeah, if I was locked to playing the game with that like super zoomer camera, because every zoomer game is like that for some reason now. Yeah, I couldn't. No, it's ridiculous. And you can also back it up a little bit too with that mod. So yeah, absolutely fantastic mod. I don't remember what it's called exactly, but if you look for it, you'll find it. And yeah, Darksiders 3 would be semi-unplayable, honestly, without the ability to increase the FOV. So there you have it. Oh, let's go, man. I'm being eaten alive here by all kinds of insects. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, sorry, but I cannot remember the point I was thinking of. Like how to make games harder, whatever. So, yeah, I suppose I might as well just say it. Difficulty, right, is yet another trait of Souls games, and Darksiders 3 is not difficult at all. So, and that's one thing. That's yet another thing that everyone was talking about. Darksiders 3 is so hard, it's difficult because it's a Souls-like. No, it's not difficult at all, and no, it's not a Souls-like. So, like I said, it primarily plays just like the previous Darksiders games, but maybe a little bit slower, and your character is a little bit squishier. So it asks for Aini. No. It asks for a bit more deliberate gameplay, and it asks for you to heavily rely on a one-to-one copy of a Bayonetta dodge. I mean, you don't go into witch time using that dodge, but you do counterattack instead, which is rather powerful and important. It also basically makes you invulnerable. You have complete iframes during that attack. It's actually not always lands. It actually not always lands. If the enemy is moving around a lot or a boss. But another thing that happens, I think, is after you do a perfect dodge, if you do it like in the middle of a combo, I think it literally cancels the rest of the combo. I think the enemy and the bosses even, I think they stop their combo if you perfect dodge them and counter them. So anyway, that's pretty much how the game plays. It's yeah, you are a bit squishy, and I understand maybe how some normies were confused, like they always are, by most things in life. They were a bit confused, maybe, like, why is my character so squishy? Because, like, Bayonetta wasn't that squishy, you know, on normal, at least. On normal, Bayonetta was not as squishy as Fury. But, yeah, so, especially if you play on the default combat mode, I understand the confusion. I get it. Because dodge is very unreliable, and your character is very squishy. So, like, how the hell am I even supposed to play this? Well, first of all, even on the default combat, it's playable. But also, what you should do, you should crank up the difficulty and switch to the classic mode and play it like Bayonetta. And all of a sudden, everything falls into place. Also, if you don't do that, around the final area of your even first playthrough, the game just becomes very annoying. Because enemies start hitting like a like a train in that last area. Difficulty-wise, also, the game is not very well balanced, honestly. Some of the bosses you just completely melt. Other bosses are incredibly tanky for, like, absolutely no good reason. Well, let's not stop in the middle of a shade, okay? We're gonna get eaten here. Yeah, like, whatever, you know. And the rest of the game is a very, very respectable Metroidvania with prime inspirations, pun intended, be actually Metroid Prime. So if Darksiders 1 was primarily inspired by 3D Zelda games, Darksiders 3 is very obviously inspired by Dark Souls in terms of its level design and by games like Metroid Prime. In fact, one of the abilities that you have, and two of the abilities, one of the abilities that you go into small, like, hole openings and crawl around in, like, vents, essentially, which is kind of like very Samus, like, and literally another traversal ability you get at one point, you essentially transform into a ball that magnetizes to walls or just any surfaces. Magnetizes to special surfaces, which can be on walls or the ceiling, and that's how you can also, like, traverse areas. Yeah. One bad thing I will say about Darksiders is that, yeah, like I said, okay, some of the bosses are just designed weirdly. Some of the encounters are not particularly good, specifically Pride. I think the Pride encounter with that stupid laser head that adds to the second phase of the fight is just cancer. Because by then I was playing on Apocalyptic, and that thing, like, absolutely melts you. Yeah, I cranked up the difficulty almost all the way by the end of the game. Who else? Wrath. Wrath you actually fight twice, and the second fight with Wrath, you're not gonna believe it. Like, I just melted this guy. And yeah, he's supposed to recover his health. Well, he doesn't do it nearly fast enough. I just melted that guy. Like, I don't understand. Like, they made Gluttony this giant tank for the first half of the fight, and then the second half of the fight is just a set piece. Like, literally, it's just set piece. The second half of the fight actually doesn't exist. And, like, you have Wrath, which is supposed to be this, like, basically one of the main bosses of the game. And he's just a complete pushover. You can dodge everything he throws at you, and the dude has like, no HP at all. Aini, you are still locked. Here, let me unhook you. Wait, did I even... did I close the gate? I don't remember. There's too much Darksiders talk. Okay, well, anyway, I think there was... What was that other point that I said I was going to make? And then... what was it that I was supposed to talk about? Okay, I don't remember. Hopefully I made it. If not, not super important. Anyway, really good game. Hate it for absolutely no good reason. Very, very nice Metroidvania type Darksiders game. I think it's way less boring than the first game, which basically by default makes it, honestly, I think the best one in the franchise. God damn it, it's so difficult to do with one hand. Ah, yes. Oh, yes. Managed to do it without breaking a finger. I know a lot of people will disagree with me because for some reason Darksiders 2 has this like giant passionate fan base, but if you're into that type of slop, then like there's no point arguing with you. But honestly, if you're anything like me, and I know I am, honestly, I think Darksiders 3 for us is by far the best game. And actually, not only the best, like I said, Darksiders 1, honestly, had big problems. And Darksiders 3 has problems, but they are not as big. And what they did in the game is just like really nice. One problem with the Metroidvania element of it is that instead of taking the page out of the Prime book properly and only use your power-ups for backtracking when it's like some real substantial secret, or maybe even like somewhere you have to go even in order to progress, you know, the main area, well, like the main story progression, they basically made it so that the entire world, literally everywhere, every 2 meters, you know, there's some kind of pickup, there's some kind of secret corner that is walled off by, you know, some kind of obstacle that you can only get rid of with a power-up, right? A Metroid-style power-up. So, essentially, if you really wanted to, right, you can backtrack through the entire game after you have gotten the final power-up, and every couple of meters there will be something for you to pick up. And usually, it's nothing. It's garbage. It's a little bit of souls, you know. It's a little bit of like an upgrade material. And like I said, okay, it's like upgrade material is honestly whatever. If you skip upgrading, if you skip like backtracking to clean up all the secret areas after you get all the power-ups, or even if you backtrack through the entire game, maybe only once with there's 4 power-ups, maybe if you backtrack with only 2 or 3, like, so you'll get some but not all, you know. Or like whatever, maybe you don't backtrack at all and it's just that the later areas you will 100%, but the earlier areas you will not. Well, by the end, if you do something like that, by the end of the game, you will maybe have like 10% not as much health, and you will do 10 to 15 less total damage. Like, trust me, it will make no difference at all on the gameplay. Absolutely not at all. Because if at any point you're feeling like, okay, you know what, I think I'm not melting that boss over there fast enough, you can just pop an item, pop a temporary power-up. That literally gives you like double damage. I don't know if it's actually double damage, but I tried it. And yeah, the thing that gives you, I think it's called just like strength shard, I think. Like, yeah, if you pop that bitch up, dude, you legitimately do, I think, twice the amount of damage. You do stupid damage if you pop that thing. And yeah, for like, you know, dispersing of regular enemies, in New Game Plus, it barely matters. And, oh, I think New Game Plus was the thing that I wanted to talk about. In New Game Plus, it barely matters, because enemies become not just 15% tankier, enemies become like 500% tankier, you know? So your 15% damage increase will not make any difference at all. And in terms of health, again, like, you're gonna be fine, trust me. You're gonna be fine, especially if you're playing on the classic mode, which I absolutely think you should. Crank up the difficulty to challenging, at least. So that's hard. There's a game journalist difficulty: balanced, challenging, apocalyptic, and reckoning. I say maybe just so that you can get the feel for how things used to be in Darksiders 3 originally. And honestly, you may say, well, that's why people raged at the game so much. No. I played it like that for over 90% of the game. And I still, at that point, would have told you that I actually think it's a really good game. No, but if you're just curious, yeah, start on balanced and default combat mode. Absolutely. Or alternatively, do classic and go straight to challenging. And if at any point you're switching to classic, challenging is the minimum you need to be. So, yeah.
doesn't really matter all that much if you do full exploration or not. There are some pretty cool power-ups you can get that are actually necessary to fully upgrade your kind of like inserts, like enhancement inserts for weapons that aren't even all just for weapons. They have like all kinds of effects in general, for which you need to be fighting mini bosses, finding and dispersing of them. Yeah, but even that is really not that necessary. So when you make the decision, if you make the decision that, well, this is a Metroidvania, so let me backtrack and see what all those secrets were that I could see but couldn't access, right, because I didn't have the power-up, you realize that it's all just, yeah, there are some relatively big secret-ish locations that you can access that way, but the fruits of that kind of backtracking, the fruits of the of your exploration are usually pretty underwhelming. And it's not even that necessarily just the fruits are underwhelming, it's also the fact that those underwhelming fruits are everywhere, right? Literally every 2 meters there's like, oh, there's a wall I need to break with that power up. Oh, here's a wall I only break with that other power up. And you just backtrack like that, and you don't feel smart for discovering any of those things, you know, and you don't feel like you're finding anything particularly rewarding. It just feels like Simon Says. It just feels like you're actually playing a bit of a Ubisoft game, right? Where it's like, okay, when you see red, press triangle. When you see purple, press triangle. When you see red, press circle, I think, whatever. You know, and it just becomes a Simon Says, you know. It doesn't particularly feel, it becomes a very, very obvious collectathon, you know. It's not really a Metroid at that point anymore. and another type of secret, you know, that or like unlocks, I suppose, but yeah, and another Metroid-ish type secret that you can unlock after backtracking through the game with all the power-ups are just absolutely random and pointless shortcuts between areas. And I understand that, well, that's cool, right? That means, like, look at our brilliant level design. Yeah, but by then you absolutely don't need those shortcuts, like, never, for anything. And the game has fast travel anyway, which is, by the way, a huge problem. I think the game should have had maybe even more of those useless shortcuts, because now they're useless, but don't have fast travel or have way less, checkpoints. I think it would have actually made the like Metroidvania element of the world, well, exploration essentially, it would have made it so much better. Yeah, guys, and the last thing I want to say would be that, yeah, so if you play on the classic combat mode, it will be brilliant. Like, you will actually have really, really good time. And honestly, though, you would have a good time, I think, even on the default mode. So I absolutely do not understand why people hated it so much, other than, well, you know, people were just confused. People were confused. Normies are confused, as they usually are, because, you know, Darksiders 2 was an open slop box game, Ubisoft, pretty much, in disguise. And then all of their favorite grifters, all of their favorite shills told them Darksiders 3 is a Souls-like. And it's so difficult, guys, you're not going to believe it, how difficult it is. And normies said, oh no, my favorite Darksiders is not Dark Souls. Oh no, I'm going to hate it now. Okay, I choose to hate it. And that's what they did. But no, honestly, guys, if you like Darksiders 1, or even if you like Darksiders 2, whatever, guys, like, doesn't matter what you like or don't like. If you like Bayonetta, you should check out Darksiders 3. It's actually a really, really good game. And one thing I should say, New Game Plus, though, in this game is completely botched, because guess what happens on New Game Plus? They take away your weapons. You have to re-pick up weapons up. Everything else carries over, but weapons don't. Actually, once you pick them back up, they automatically are of the level that you left them. So basically, you still carry your weapons with you, but you cannot access any of them until you get to the point where you like re-pick them up. Which is super stupid for a Metroid-ish, game, because so you cannot sequence break at all. And I suppose that's what the developer was probably afraid of. What if gamers sequence break our Metroidvania? Oh no, wouldn't that be a tragedy? Again, like some of these modern devs, even when they end up making a really nice video game or they have a really brilliant idea, they have like 10 other ideas that are just baffling to me. So yeah, the dev basically purposely took your ability away to sequence break the game and to 100% the exploration. Because trust me, after you get to the point where it's essentially just press one button and fight the final boss, like there is no point doing any exploration. There's no point doing any exploration because you are already so overpowered. Even if I played on Apocalyptic, my character was ridiculously overpowered, and I probably had like 100,000 hard souls in my inventory, so I could probably get like at least 10 more levels out of my character if I wanted to. So yeah, the amount of hard souls you get in Darksiders 3 if you explore is ridiculous. So that's just, to support my claim, my counterclaim that, it's Dark Souls game now. It's very difficult. I don't know if I want to play it. It's not difficult at all, guys. You can make yourself hella overpowered if you want to, super early on. I purposely didn't do it. I was just like sitting on my souls for the longest time. I started using them eventually, but I was just sitting on them because thinking, well, like maybe something super expensive will come up. And it's only armor, but all the armor does the same thing. It's basically just that each armor slightly enhances only one like power-up weapon. But which one do you want? What if you like the first one, for example, the flame knives? Because those were my favorite on my first playthrough. Well, that's it then. You buy that thing. It gives you plus 5% health, I think, or maybe damage reduction, either or, and plus, I think, either 10 or 15% damage with that weapon. That's it. That's all the armor does. So, like, all of the armor does just that. It's just like, whatever, guys. You definitely can waste a lot of souls if you want to on upgrading equipment. But, sorry, not upgrading equipment, but on like, as you progress through the main story, more and more higher tier upgrade materials will become available in the shop. So you can waste a lot of souls on that if you want to, but again, it's not particularly required nor needed. And in fact, you may be feeling like the game is a bit too easy anyway, and just not entirely feel like making it like overpowering. Because honestly, if you don't necessarily feel like the game is just like punishing you overly too much for some reason, you should probably not go particularly impressive into upgrading your character, because you can get hella overpowered. Yeah, but for New Game Plus, first of all, the enemy scaling is just ridiculous. They become super tanky, basically making it so that if you want to start a New Game Plus, you don't get any weapons. Enemies become hella tanky, which kind of defeats the purpose of, having the power fantasy. The power fantasy of just playing through the game again, but as an overpowered god. Yeah, whatever. In Dark Souls, New Game Plus also gets a bit more difficult, of course, but I don't think it literally makes everyone, twice as tankier or 5 times as tankier, on your first New Game Plus. Either stronger or tankier, like, no. I think the scaling is actually a bit more subtle. You can barely even feel it until you are, I think, way over the first half of your second playthrough. You can barely even feel that, oh, these bosses like really, or these bosses or these bigger enemies are really stronger than they were on my just like NG. You know, in this NG plus, yeah, they are definitely stronger. Like, yeah, you can barely even feel that until you are like in Honor Londo, maybe, and not even then, I think. But in Darksiders, immediately you cannot feel it all that much on like fodder enemies, on just absolutely low-level grunts. But anyone who's even remotely officer-ish in status literally have 5 times the amount of health like normal enemies have at the end of NG. So at NG Plus basically ends up being just like NG, but more tedious. Enemies hit about the same. They hit at the end of like end game of normal new game, but they have like 5 to 10, you know, amount of health. There are additional enemies here and there, ambush type enemies, and those have like 20 times the amount of health that you would expect from that kind of enemy at the end of NG1. Well, not NG1, but NG, right? And yeah, I mean, I played through it. It's not really difficult, it's just more tedious. Like, you might as well just start a new game again and crank up the difficulty to Reckoning or Apocalyptic from the start, and to see if you are actually up for the challenge. And you are. I'm just gonna tell you, you are. If you play on Classic, you're gonna get the experience like hardly no Souls game will ever give you this experience, because Dark Souls 3 is not a Souls game. It's actually a pretty interesting blend of God of War with like a low shelf Bayonetta, and you feel quick, nimble, and dangerous. And neither War nor Death were quite as nimble, were quite as I don't know, you kind of actually feel, because of the dodge, usually. You don't have any inputs like in a character action game, but because of the dodge, you legitimately feel occasionally like you get this character action-y feel. You get it. And it feels good. You feel dangerous and you feel nimble. You feel like a character action character almost. And it's awesome, because neither God of War nor the previous 2 Darksiders actually did that. Absolutely forget all the Souls references. Yes, there are a little bit some Souls inspirations here and there. They are completely superficial and don't do anything important. What is important is how they actually made the combat and how they made the open world. And I think it's the best open world in the series, and it's by far the best combat in the series. And I even didn't hate all that much the art style, because it is still kind of like low poly-ish, mega cartoony, and relatively flat due to being like cartoony stylized. Not cel-shaded, but still like not as textury as you would expect, right? Because it's kind of like imitating somewhat of a drawn, like 2D art style. But you know what? Because it's the next generation of graphics, it's actually, I mean, I would still prefer if it wasn't quite as cartoony, because cartoonishness makes it look low poly. And I'm not a huge fan of how that makes me feel on the insides, in my guts. But it is much more detailed, and it is much higher fidelity than something like Darksiders 1 or even 2, which, like, 1 basically had no lighting at all. It was pretty flat, and it was like all gray. No, there's a lot of color, and it's not like overly cheerish, you know, Fortnite type of color. No, I think it's pretty comic booky, the way it's used. but I think it's not it's not revolting. It's not a revolting use of bright colors like, the magenta zoomer generation video games been doing for the last, like, whatever, 7 years or so. No. It's very nice. It's not revolting, and it's for the kind of like comic booky style, it actually works for me now, because the amount of detail, kind of like the level of graphical fidelity now, has finally gotten to the point where this style works for me. It was just way too flat and way too low detail for me in the previous games. It actually, I think, works fantastically this time. I would prefer it to still be a little bit less cartoony and more kind of like detail-y in a almost realistic type of way, if you will. But like, by far my favorite Darksiders game, by far. And yeah, if you play on Classic, if you're worried about it being difficult or being clunky, whatever, no, it's not clunky, it's not difficult, okay? But if you're worried, play on Classic. You will feel dangerous, you will feel nimble, you will feel like a character action game character. It will be good times, trust me. I am almost angry at how much and how strongly everyone hated Darksiders 3. And it's actually a really, really good game. So, anyway, yeah, to sum up though, my thoughts that I think I never properly finished on NG+. Yeah, you might as well just start a new game on higher difficulty, because NG+ literally just the same thing again. You don't get the opportunity to play through the entire game without backtracking, like, because you have all the power-ups. You would think, oh, hey, I have all the power-ups, I can now play through the entire game and I never have to backtrack. I can immediately go and like 100% everything without the tedium of backtracking again, because on new game, just new game normal, there is no point to backtrack once you are at the final boss. There is no point to backtrack because you're already overpowered. And I, at that point, already backtracked like multiple times without getting the final weapon. So there technically were kind of like sporadically places where I still haven't been. But I've covered probably something like 88, maybe 92% of all the things to cover. But in order to find those additional things, because they are everywhere, all the power-ups unlock something somewhere in every single corner of the map from beginning to end. I was like, I'm gonna have to literally run through the entire game again just to see, oh, okay, now I have the final power-up. I'm gonna have to run through the entire thing again now to see if there's anything meaningful, I can find with this one last power-up. I just said, F it. So once I got to the final area, I backtracked through the entire game with 3 powers. But the last one, I only did the final area to like 100%, obviously, because I had all the powers. But the rest of the game, on my first playthrough, I only backtracked it fully with 3 power-ups. And yeah, it's more than enough. But you think, oh, I'm gonna play New Game Plus, and with all the power-ups, I will finally 100% everything. I will finally see everything. And you start New Game Plus, and boom, you don't have anything. And it's just like, well, you don't have anything, and all the stronger enemies are ridiculously fat now. Like, dude, you might as well just start a new game. And that's what I recommend. I suppose do it, or you may not have to do it at all. You just, because you have me. If you're listening to this, you have me. You have the best Darksiders 3 advice ever. Start new game on Classic, on Challenging, and then absolutely feel free to bump it up if you feel it becoming way too easy. And before you fight the final boss, do backtrack through the entire game if you absolutely feel like doing it, although by then you will probably be sick of backtracking again, because you have probably done it already. Because the enticing is just way too strong. because you get that new power up and you think, I really want to check out what was that thing over there. And sometimes it's actually something pretty cool. So yeah, by the time you get the last power up, you will probably be like, you know what, I don't care. I know what's in those like other places where I haven't accessed yet. Maybe it's going to be one corner. It's going to be like just one small corner of a hallway, and there's going to be an item there. Like whatever. Okay, I don't need it. But if you're still afraid of at one point getting a FOMO for not 100%ing the world, absolutely do it before you do the final boss, or otherwise before you tell the game directly to take you into the New Game Plus, because that will override the save, and from that point on you only have two options: either start a new game or continue to New Game Plus, which is just like a normal new game but more tedious. So yeah, New Game Plus, I think, a bit of a botch. Everything else in the game, like I said, instead of, I think, except for the dev, I think, going a bit overboard with Metroidvania type, like power-up based collectibles, so to speak. You know, turning a Metroidvania into a collectathon. Backtrack at all, collectathon at all, with power-up at all. I think there is like hardly anything wrong with this game except for a little bit of balancing on the boss side of things. But what game doesn't have bad bosses? You know, it's need I remind you that the best game ever, which is Bayonetta, half the game is like a set piece. You know, so games have flaws, but some of them are so awesome it actually does not necessarily just detract all that much. And Darksiders 3 is kind of like this way. Yeah, you know, some of the bosses are pretty questionable. Not necessarily bosses themselves or their mechanics, but just like the way they're balanced. But guess what, like whatever. You know, yeah, Gluttony is super tanky, but actually you don't know it while you play it. But here's my advice to you. Do not lower the difficulty on Gluttony, okay? Gluttony has this sweeping attack that it does across like the entire floor, and you basically cannot dodge it. I think you're intended to jump over it, but Fury's jump height is like 1 foot. Or 2 feet maybe with the double jump. Actually, double jump barely even gives you any more air. So I actually didn't think about it when I was fighting Gluttony. I was trying to dodge through those sweeping attacks, and it was infuriating because you can't. But I ended up tanking through those. And the thing is that you really shouldn't be, because those, especially those attacks, they hit like a train. Like Gluttony is almost like a skill check type of boss, because like everything that boss does, like all the other bosses are actually way weaker than even like normal enemies. Normal enemies can kill you like that if you're not paying attention. Well, maybe not like that necessarily, but if like 3 enemies are fighting you at the same time and they're all like above fodder level, and you're not paying attention, yeah, they can kill you quickly. And yeah, that's like yet another thing, right? That's like normies were confused with, like, oh, where's my power fantasy? Well, your power fantasy is that you're still powerful, you just expect it to be dodging like Bayonetta, bitch. Not just mash buttons. That was really good catch, actually. Really good save. Sorry, dude, I wasn't paying attention that you weren't paying attention. Yeah. Even a high-level Fury is actually pretty squishy. But all the bosses actually aren't even all that strong as most stronger type enemies in the main game. Gluttony is the exception. Gluttony hits like a hacking train, and I think Gluttony is the only one who hits like that, actually. And yeah, those sweeping attacks, you just cannot dodge them. And each one of them hits for like 80% of your health, I think. So yeah, fun times. I didn't even know you could dodge it. And yeah, so you actually don't need to worry about it, okay? Once you get that boss to 50% health, the rest of the fight is actually a set piece. Just be observant, careful, not to die during that set piece, because you can, and you would have to redo the entire boss fight. But yeah, just carefully, you know, don't die, and just pay attention. It's a bit of a riddle. Really. Yeah, don't do unnecessary risks. You know, it will eat you if you just approach it. Okay, here's my spoiler cautious kind of hint. Be careful. Take it slow. You have pretty much unlimited time. The boss can hardly get you if you keep the distance. And yeah, just solve it, you know. But yeah, it took me, I kid you not, like 7 tries, I think. Maybe 6 or 7 tries. Well, okay, maybe not 7. I would say 5 or 6, maybe. I don't know, whatever. Something like that. Over 5 tries it took me to get it to half health. And then I was stupid and I died in a set piece, and then I had to fight him again multiple times to get him to have health. And those half health situations, by the way, both time I got him to 50% of his health, I was just glass cannoning the living hell out of him. I was just going extreme. I was like popping health after health, and just damage everything I had. And I could do it. If I were to play that boss seriously, those sweeping attacks, because I was stupid, I didn't think to jump over them. Maybe you can, I don't actually know. I don't know. Because on my second playthrough, my New Game Plus, I'm not there yet, and I don't think I will be. Did I say I played through it when I was talking about New Game Plus? No, I haven't played through it. I played a lot of it, but not through it, and I'm considering now whether I will actually continue or just maybe, you know, stop for now and later maybe do another new game. Yeah, but I'm yet to fight Gluttony one more time, so that I know if you can jump over those sweeping attacks, those sweeps. But you cannot dodge through them, and I didn't think about it because I was like in my Bayonetta mode, you know, and I was like, when I dodge, I phase through anything attacking me. Enemies, characters, weapons, whatever, all right? So I was in my Bayonetta mode, or my Bloodborne mode, maybe, if you will, and I didn't think about it. I didn't think that you probably can jump over them, but I didn't think about it, and yeah, so it took a lot out of me to get to that point. But yeah, on the higher difficulty, Gluttony has just ridiculous amount of health, and does insane damage. Even unbalanced, it does pretty big damage. And the whole fight, by the way, I was in the default mode still, in default combat mode. So yeah, you have questionable elements like that, right? But, well, actually, guess what? It was an interesting challenge. I created an interesting challenge for myself because I realized that, okay, I just don't have the patience to learn this boss. Can I melt him? And actually, he has so much health, you really cannot on higher difficulties. But obviously, you can melt him either more or less, right, depending on what you do. And by doing more, my strategy ended up working in the end. So yeah, I hardly see anything wrong with the game except for a few elements that were kind of meh. Like, obviously, I would have loved if the graphic style was not cartoonish. I would have loved if maybe the game had less teleportation and more traversal. And I would have loved if the actual traversal and Metroidvania exploration was less collect-a-thony Simon Says type of thing, and, you know, if those things that you find were actually more meaningful and rarer, and less just entire backtracking through the entire, you know, game map was pretty much necessary to 100% it, because like, honestly, it's pretty cool when in a Metroidvania game you walk by some kind of door that doesn't open, and it's memorable, so you remember it, and later in the game you remember to come back and check it. But when there's so much crap behind every corner, that you cannot even keep track of it all or remember any of it, and you end up well, essentially the only way to see if there's anything there, you know, behind me, is literally to backtrack all the way to the beginning, you know, and basically run through the entire game again. Well, that's, I don't know. I think less would be more, you know. But except for that, and again, allow me to repeat myself for the last time, if the art style was not as cartoonish, or even not cartoonish at all, yeah, I would have liked the game better. I would have liked if the combat system was maybe a bit better, because I would have loved if the combat system was a bit more character actiony, because it is essentially a God of War clone. It's not a Souls clone, but combat system is very basic actually. I would have loved if it was if we had a stinger, if we had an actual launcher, you know, if we had actual aerial combos. Actually, in a way, I wouldn't necessarily mind if the combat system in some ways was a little bit more like Darksiders 1. But I like the rhythm that they chose for this game. And they stroke a very almost Bayonetta-ish balance. The enemies are not as imaginative as Bayonetta, and not... they don't differentiate in what they do enough, you know, to provide you with like a Bayonetta level fun. But I like how they balance the whole thing around you fighting, you know, like 3 to 4, maybe even 2 to 3, or even 1 to 2 enemies at the time, most of the time. Instead of fighting one enemy at the time like Dark Souls, or instead of fighting like 15 enemies at the time like in other Darksiders games and God of War clones. It's well, again, it especially with the dodge, it feels very Bayonetta-y, and I loved it. But yeah, there are things you can do to compensate for the lack of like a stinger, for example. But honestly, like, god damn it, like the game absolutely needed a stinger. And the combo system is so just like rudimentary, you know, generic, like pseudo God of War shitty combo system. It's not even funny. You might as well just had like one combo for each weapon. You might as well they just done that, and one charged attack per weapon. One charged attack per weapon and one combo per weapon. They might as well just done that. Because the combat system is cool because it's very dodge based, right? But so it stays fresh, because it's, you know, the game is not about comboing, you know, the game is about, you know, attack, 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 dodge, attack, 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 dodge. So it's not really about comboing, but just like the amount of command moves would have been nice if it was bigger. Unfortunately, you basically don't have them at all. You know, you have your standard combo, you have a few variations on it that actually do like different things. They are substantially different combos, but they like practically do the same thing. One of the combos is literally just hold the attack button and the Fury will do this giant combo with her whip. Like, wow, so engaging. Yeah, I would have loved if maybe the combat, specifically the combo system and the attacks, were a bit more complex in this game. But again, the game is not really about that, you know. No digging. So yeah, Darksiders 3, absolutely awesome. You should definitely play it. And the hate that game received from the confused normies, it's just like one of the most ridiculous things ever. Like, anyone hating on this game, like, literally just didn't play it at all. If you legitimately played it and you hated it or liked it like less than either like 2, whatever, but legitimately, like, what you would say, like, first one is better? I don't know, borderline anyone who doesn't think that Darksiders 3 is the best game in the franchise, I think there are many things wrong with your taste, or just the fact that you are a grifting shill liar. Yeah, that about it. See, John doesn't hate everything. All right, bye-bye.